Raise your hand if Mike Flanagan has ever made you ugly cry because a work of art he made was just too good, too emotionally powerful.
Everything you've ever loved. Everything you see.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. I've been doing a series for a fair few months now where I read the source material for an upcoming film adaptation, I make a video on that book or perhaps a short story, and then when the film comes out I do a film review. So this time around I have this Stephen King book, If It Bleeds, which I checked out from my local library. Make sure all of you get a library card from your local library because it helps them with their funding. If It Bleeds is a collection of 4 novellas. I haven't finished reading all of them at the time of recording this video, but I have read Life of Chuck, which is the second novella in this book, and the source material for the upcoming film adaptation, which will be directed by Mike Flanagan, who also wrote the film's screenplay. If you don't already know, Mike Flanagan is known to many for any number of horror series he has made for Netflix, including The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass. My favorite series of his is The Fall of the House of Usher, but my favorite work of his is the 2019 film Dr. Sleep, which was yet another Stephen King adaptation. I still hold a grudge against people who slept on that film and caused it to end its theatrical run so early because I had wanted to do more rewatches at the cinema, but then it was gone. It's still one of my favorite films of that entire year. But no matter which of Mike Flanagan's works is your favorite, I think that expectations are understandably high because he has managed to make many compelling works of art that people find deeply moving and emotionally poignant. The trailer hasn't shown too much, but I'm fine with that because really all you needed to do was say Mike Flanagan is doing yet another Stephen King adaptation for the big screen, and I find myself rushing to the computer to see when I will be able to pre-order my ticket. First, I'm going to tell you about what's in this novella. It's quite short, but I will explain things in detail and offer up some early thoughts about the adaptation of this to the big screen. The novella consists of 3 acts presented in reverse order. Now, I would assume that Mike Flanagan won't present the information in that exact order, but instead ebb in and out of different points in the timeline of Chuck's life in a way that he deems to be the best method of initiating an audience who has never read the novella. Full spoiler alert for the novella, and by extension, probably the film as well, although I haven't seen the film yet, so I don't know anything more than what has been presented in the trailer. Act 3 is called Thanks, Chuck. We are introduced to a man named Marty Anderson, played in the film by Chiwetel Ejiofor. He works as a high school teacher, and the world around him is falling apart. It's been 8 months since the internet first began to experience short interruptions, but now the internet is falling apart to an increasing degree to where it's really only a matter of time before it's just going to stop working altogether. There are other problems going on, such as entire species of birds and fish dying off, and California is increasingly breaking apart and getting washed away into the ocean. There are also a lot of advertisements, things like giant billboards that have begun to pop up, of a man who is wearing glasses, smiling cheerfully while sitting at a desk. He looks a lot like an accountant, and above his heads are the words Charles Krantz, and below his desk are the words 39 great years. Thanks, Chuck. So the poster is of Tom Hiddleston's character, Chuck. Marty has never heard of Chuck. He has no idea who Chuck is, and he's very confused by this poster because the text on it seems like a retirement message, but if he was someone that had worked somewhere for 39 years, you would think that he would be much older than how Tom Hiddleston looks in that picture. Marty is driving home, and it takes a long time because there's quite a bit of traffic. A bridge recently collapsed, and there is no indication that repairs are going to happen. It's all playing into the larger picture of the world falling apart. Finally, Marty gets home, and he's able to use his landline phone to call his ex-wife. Marty is quite happy about the fact that he kept the landline because cell coverage barely works nowadays. Marty's ex-wife is named Felicia, and that is Karen Gillan's character. Despite these two being exes, they have a good relationship. They also apparently still sleep together sometimes. She works as a nurse at City General, and nowadays the nursing staff often have to handle patients trying to take their own lives. They check in on each other and how they're doing. Felicia wants to make sure that Marty is taking his ulcer medication. Marty doesn't have a lot of food in his fridge. We, the readers, also learn throughout this chapter that the food supplies are yet another ongoing issue with this this whole end of the world situation that seems to be unfolding. Felicia and Marty say that they love each other and ponder the end of the world, and also the onslaught of Chuck Krantz billboards. Apparently, the Chuck Krantz coverage has also started to pop up on NPR as advertisements. Felicia and Marty say their goodbyes. Marty eats some hot dogs he boiled and finds that Netflix is no longer working. Instead, the television displays that same message about Charles Krantz, 39 great years. Thanks, Chuck. The next morning, Marty is driving with the intention of going to work when he comes across Gus Wilfong walking up the street. Gus is Matthew Willard's character, and he works as a supervisor at the city's public works department. Marty rolls his car window down, and he asks Gus where his car is. Gus explains that a sinkhole opened up a couple of miles away near where his car was parked, so he had to walk the 3 miles back. They're assuming there won't be any work done to fix that sinkhole. There's somewhere around 20 to 30 cars at the bottom of the sinkhole, and the people who were in those cars will not be coming back. Gus advises Marty that he won't be able to make it to work because of the sinkhole making the already terrible traffic situation even worse. He also says that apparently even more of California has broken up and gotten swept away into the ocean, which means even more of the food-producing regions are gone. There's all kinds of weather anomalies and similarly apocalyptic problems springing up all over the states, as well as countries across the world. Lack of food, diseases, and so on and so forth. A woman named Andrea walks by, and Marty recognizes her as living 1 or 2 streets over and being acquainted with his ex-wife, Felicia. Andrea shares that the bank she works at is leaning on the edge of the sinkhole and thus will probably be condemned. Marty asks about the billboard on the bank building and whether or not this mysterious Charles Krantz person is someone associated with the bank. Perhaps he's an employee there that is set to retire. Andrea says that she doesn't know him, and she continues her journey home. Gus tells Marty that he believes that the world's population has been going through the 5 stages of grief about these bad things that have been happening, and that now they've all reached the acceptance stage. Now that the world is going to end, people are just waiting. A plane flies overhead and does a skywriting message of those same words on the posters for Charles Krantz, also known as Chuck. Marty sleeps for most of the day, and then he decides to go to Harvest Acres, which is where Felicia lives, about 3 miles away. Since driving doesn't seem like a good idea with all of the traffic as well as the sinkhole to consider, Marty decides to put on some athleisure wear and walk there. On the way, he encounters an older man named Samuel Yarborough. He was the owner and chief undertaker of the Yarborough Funeral Home, and in the film he's played by Carl Lumbly. Sam dreamed of being a television weatherman when he was younger, and he still keeps up with meteorology. They decide to make the journey to Harvest Acres together, albeit slowly enough for Sam, who has arthritis. Sam tells Marty that there actually used to be 23 hours and 56 minutes in a stellar day, plus a few odd seconds. But now, based on his calculations, there are 24 hours and 2 minutes in a day. This means that the Earth's rotation is slowing down. Marty is certain that Charles Krantz, the man on this sign, this man means something, but we're not exactly sure why or how. The two of them reach Harvest Acres, where they encounter a young girl who's roller skating. They say hello to one another, but then the street lights go out, along with house lights. Power outages have been happening, but this one feels different. It's as if the lights are not going to come back on again. They see a glowing face appear on the window of a house on the corner of a street within their viewing capabilities, and it's Chuck's face, with that same message as the poster also appearing above and below his face. Marty tells the girl to go home, and Marty hurries to Felicia's house. Felicia answers the door holding a candle, and they hug each other, and they both seem to realize that the end is here. The face of Chuck has begun to appear on all of the house windows. Then the book cuts to a man named Douglas Beaton, who is an associate professor of philosophy in Ithaca College's Department of Philosophy and Religion. He's sitting in a hospital room waiting for his brother-in-law to die. His brother-in-law is Chuck. lying in a hospital bed with most of the life support machinery already having been turned off. Chuck's son Brian shows up, having left school early. Brian is a freshman in high school, and Brian is very upset, understandably so, that his father is about to die. And he laments how Chuck just turned 39 last winter and he's too young to die. Chuck has glioblastoma, which is a fast-growing malignant brain tumor. Brian and Douglas talk about how Chuck used to work in the accounting department of the Midwest Trust, which is a bank. He was loved at his job, he loved dancing, and still had dreams he is never going to be able to fulfill, like going traveling to various international destinations or seeing his son graduate high school. During this conversation between Brian and Doug, we gain full clarity about what these visions of Chuck are in the first bit of the story that we've been introduced to. You know what they say, Brian? Death takes the best of us, and death takes the rest of us. Brian tries to smile. If that's supposed to be comforting, you need to try harder. Doug seems not to have heard. He's looking at his brother-in-law, who is, in Doug's mind, an actual brother, who has given his sister a good life, who helped him get his start in business. And that's really the least of it. They had some fine times together. Not enough, but it looks like they'll have to do. The human brain is finite, no more than a sponge of tissue inside a cage of bone, but the mind within the brain is infinite. Its storage capacity is colossal, its imaginative reach beyond our ability to comprehend. I think when a man or woman dies, a whole world falls to ruin, the world that person knew and believed in. Think of that, kiddo. Billions of people on Earth, and each one of those billions with a world inside. The Earth their minds have conceived. And now my dad's world is dying. But not yours, Doug says, and gives his nephew another squeeze. Ours will go on a little while longer. And your mother's. We need to be strong for her, Brian. As strong as we can. So yes, everything you saw of Marty, his ex-wife Felicia, and a multitude of people they encountered, those are all people who exist in Chuck's mind. Because Chuck is dying, we see the world that they live in ending. And in fact, we do see Chuck pass away while his wife, son, and brother-in-law stand around his hospital bed, and the final words Doug says to him are the words on that billboard poster, advertisement, skywriting, that's been shown all over the first world readers were introduced to. And in the world of Chuck's mind, Marty and Felicia sit next to each other in chairs on the back lawn. They watch various stars and planets begin to go out. Marty turns to Felicia and begins to tell her he loves her when everything goes black. And that's the end of Act 3. That is exactly the type of devastating, existential, anxiety-inducing, emotional gut punch I would expect to see in a Mike Flanagan film or series. No wonder this is the next Stephen King adaptation he would do. I mean, am I prepared to be emotionally wrecked by another Mike Flanagan work? Probably not, but I will go see it anyway. At minimum, we need to see how he adapted it because these acts are a bit sparse. The novella in total is only about 60 pages long, though I would imagine the page count could vary depending on the format you are reading from. But still, I feel like it would make sense to flesh out more of the details and fill in some of the gaps between the chapters in order to make everything flow better for the audience that's uninitiated to this source material. Act 2 is called Buskers, and I'm probably going to explain this one a lot faster than I did the first one, because what's in this one doesn't have that element of building up tension and mystery and then presenting a grand reveal of what's really going on in what you've just read. A busker named Jared Frank is setting up his drum kit at his favorite spot on a beautiful day. He places a top hat in front of him with a sign that reads, "This is a magic hat. Give freely, and your contribution will double." Jared is a Juilliard dropout because the school wants students to think about what they're doing, musically speaking, whereas Jared's approach to music is more so that the beat is your friend and thinking is the enemy. Judging by the trailer, I would say that Jared has been changed to be a female character in the film. This character is only present briefly as Act 2 doesn't have as much plot as 3 and 1. And the only necessity for the character is that they can play drums very well. That's not specific to a gender. A woman named Janice Halliday is walking by. She's just been dumped by her boyfriend of 16 months over text message. She isn't in love with him, but she's still not happy about being dumped. It's then that she hears drumming a couple of blocks ahead of her. And now we have Charles Krantz, aka Chuck, entering this chapter. He's in Boston for a conference, and it's revealed to readers that he only has 9 months to live, although he doesn't know that yet. He has been struggling with migraines as of late, though, quite a bit. Chuck is reminiscing in his mind about having been the lead singer of a band called the Retros during his junior year in high school. The band was called that because they played a lot of music from the 60s and 70s. Chuck thinks about how he also used to dance with the younger sister of the lead guitarist, though he can't remember the younger sister's name. He hears the busker playing a really good old-time rhythm, and Chuck thinks to himself, where's a little sister to dance with when you need one? Chuck approaches the busker, he puts his briefcase down and begins to dance, prompting people to put money in the magic hat. Chuck's dance moves begin to pick up in momentum and difficulty. He even performs the moonwalk. This causes even more people to gather around and watch and put money in the hat. People are cheering for him, and Chuck just feels very alive and in the moment. Janice is one of the people in the crowd, and when Chuck sees her, he holds his hands out to her and invites her to dance. She joins him, and they proceed to do a whole dance routine. And I don't care about what's realistic. I hope that Mike Flanagan makes this dance number highly elaborate, whimsical, and over the top. The crowd cheers for them, and Jared, the drummer, finishes that beat. The crowd asks for more, and at this point, people have started to get their phones out, but Chuck is tired and danced out, so he politely declines. 20 minutes later, the trio are together. Jared is being helped to pack up his drum kit and load it up into the van. Jared says that today is magic and splits his money with Janice and Chuck, although Chuck really doesn't need it. He shares a bit of information about how he learned to dance, which is all stuff we will see in Act 1, so I will just save that information for them so I don't have to repeat it twice. And by the way, if I didn't already say this, Chuck is an accountant. Act 2 ends with a sad paragraph about how Chuck is going to lose the ability to walk, dance, chew food. He will forget his wife's name and experience a horrific amount of pain, but what he will occasionally remember is how one day he stopped, dropped his briefcase, and began to dance, and that is why the world was made. Really quick, before we go into the events of Act 1, I will say that I think Act 2 will resonate with viewers a lot better if they already know things from Act 1. Now, I'm not saying it has to be presented in an entirely regular sequential order, but when I think about how the Monkey short story was formatted with hopping back and forth between past and present, whereas the Monkey film simply let the majority of the material from the past play out before the audience followed the majority of what happens in the present day material, I think that was the right choice. Certain modifications make sense when you are switching mediums. Print has a lot more freedom to hop around like that, but if you hop around too much in film, it can discombobulate your audience to such an extent that they are no longer connected to what's happening. Act 1 is called I Contain Multitudes. We are in Chuck's childhood, adolescence, various moments of his life from before the age of 18. Chuck's parents died in a car accident, after which he went to live with his grandparents. He used to call them by the nicknames of Zadie and Bubby until the other children made fun of him for it. His grandparents are actually named Albie and Sara Krantz, and in the film they're played by Mark Hamill and Sara. Sara, if you're not already familiar, is best known for playing Sloane in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. For the first year or so after the death of his parents, life is very sad at his grandparents' house. Not only did they lose their son and their daughter-in-law, they also lost their granddaughter Alyssa, as Chuck's mother was 6 months pregnant at the time. Chuck's grandmother would often play music while she was cooking, and she would ask Chuck to dance. She also got him into classic movie musicals such as Swing Time, West Side Story, which is on my wall, and Singing in the Rain. All of those are excellent choices. Those are classics for very good, well-deserved reasons. The house has a cupola, which remains locked. Chuck asks why this is, and his grandparents simply say that it's not safe up there. However, shortly before Chuck's 11th birthday, Chuck ends up getting more of an answer from his grandfather, who tells Chuck that if he were to go up there, he might see a lot more than he wanted. The house is Victorian, and Grandpa Albie says that the cupola is full of ghosts, so he himself has gone up there only less than a half dozen times. Albie has been drinking during this conversation, which is why he's been more forthcoming about these secrets, and he seems to reveal to Chuck that whenever he goes up there, he sees when people are going to die, and that it's the waiting That's the hard part. Waiting for them to die, knowing certain details about that beforehand without knowing when exactly they are going to die. When Chuck tries to ask his grandmother about this, she denies that there's anything to do with ghosts in the cupola of Grandpa Albie being able to see death before it happens, but Chuck doesn't fully believe that to be the case. Over time, Chuck gets interested in reading whodunits, so he takes a notebook and begins to write down information about what his grandfather said about various ghosts he claimed to have seen of people before they died. Chuck adds other information that he's able to find out about how those people died. And now, Chuck ponders that he's waiting the way that his grandfather is. On the last day of 6th grade, Chuck's teacher, Miss Richards, who is played by Kate Siegel. We all know who Kate Siegel is. She is in every Mike Flanagan's project. She is also married to him. Miss Richards tries to read Chuck's class a few verses from Walt Whitman's Song of Myself, but they're not interested because they're really restless and they're wanting to get on with their summer holiday. Once class is dismissed, Chuck asks Miss Richards what that one line means. I am large, I contain multitudes. And she is delighted to tell him. We see a bit of this in the trailer where she places her palms to his temples.
The world, Chuck. Everything you've ever loved. Everything you see.
And she tells him about how there's so much inside his head. Everything he sees, knows, the world, memories, and the more that he lives, that world inside his mind will get bigger, brighter, more detailed, and complex. Before Chuck leaves, he asks her if she believes in ghosts, and she tells him she believes that memories are ghosts, but she doesn't believe in the supernatural kind of ghosts. Chuck's grandmother dies at the end of that summer, and Chuck's grandfather seems more sad, but also relieved in a way because he's no longer waiting for this death to happen, which he had foreseen in the cupola. In 7th grade, Chuck joins the Twirlers and Spinners Club, which is where he further learned to dance. Some of his dance background came from dancing with his grandmother, but any additional thing that he learned was from this club. So this is where I would imagine that the film adaptation is going to show this before the scene of him as an adult dancing to the buskers drumming, because you have to show the audience what they need to know for that scene to really resonate with them. Whereas in a book, you can just tell the reader the memories in his mind that are pushing him towards seizing that moment and dancing in front of the busker. Chuck is the best dancer in this club, and he's often paired up with the girls who are clumsy. But at one point, he gets paired with an 8th grade girl named Kat McCoy, who is the best dancer of the girls, and he loves dancing with her because they're able to fully dance. They catch the rhythm, they let it flow, and I do have to mention that Kat McCoy is played by Trinity Bliss, whom I recognized immediately in the trailer because Miss Trinity is Took in James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water, which is a film I absolutely live for. My regular viewers know that. If you're new here, hi, I love that film. Kat proposes that they dance together at the upcoming school dance, not for them to attend as dates since Kat McCoy already has a boy that she's going out with, but she's very enthusiastic about the idea of them being able to showcase their dancing capabilities there. Chuck is a bit self-conscious about potentially doing this in front of everyone, so Kat offers to bring a pair of Cuban heels belonging to her brother that will make him taller, which is what he's self-conscious about because she's taller than him, so Chuck agrees. They do a dance together at the fling, and it goes very well. The story then jumps to when Chuck is 39, 6 months before he's going to die of a brain tumor, so 3 months after he danced with Janice to the buskers drumming. Chuck reveals to his wife, Ginny, that he didn't get the scar he has on the back of his hand the way that he had originally told her. He tells his wife that what actually happened was, after he danced with Kat McCoy, he went outside and was basking in the feelings of what he just experienced. He's thinking, the universe is large. It contains multitude. It also contains me. And in this moment, I am wonderful. I have a right to be wonderful. And he did a little moonwalk under the basketball hoop. He twirled with his arms outstretched, and the back of his hand hit a chain link fence that had a bit of protruding wire. And in his mind, he reflects on how maybe he had told the lie of claiming that it was Kat McCoy's boyfriend and his friends who were upset about this dance and beat him up in retaliation because he was essentially casting himself as the main character of that moment. But beyond that, this experience was something really meaningful to him, even if he couldn't tell tell the story for whatever reason, that he felt like he couldn't tell it. Back to Chuck's youth. Chuck's grandfather died of a heart attack 4 years after the fall fling dance. At the time, Chuck was a junior in high school. Grandpa left him everything, which helped him to pay for his university tuition. And once the Victorian house was sold, that also helped Chuck to buy a house of his own for him and his wife. Chuck's other grandparents, with whom he wasn't very close to, came to live with him for that last period of high school. One of the items Chuck found in his grandfather Albie's personal effects is a key to the cupola. So he unlocks the padlock, goes up there, and at first, nothing looks out of the ordinary. But then, when he turns to leave the room, he sees a hospital bed in the middle of the room, and a man lying in it with a scar on the back of his hand. And Chuck realizes that Chuck's grandfather, Albie, saw a vision of his wife dying while pulling loaves of bread off the shelves at the store she was in when it happened. All those years ago, when Grandpa Albie made a comment about his wife's death, he had said to Chuck, "Because of Sara, your bubby, and the bread." Albie told Chuck this before Sara's death ever happened, so he did see her death before it happened. And now Chuck realizes that his own waiting has begun. He knows that he's the man in the hospital bed. He looks back in the cupola to try to see if he can get a better look at the vision to make a guess of how old this version of Chuck is. Chuck started back into the cupola for a closer look, but the vision was gone. No man, no hospital bed, no table. There was one final faint bip from the unseen monitor, then that was gone too. The man did not fade as ghostly apparitions did in movies. He was just gone, insisting he had never been there in the first place. He wasn't, Chuck thought. I will insist that he wasn't, and I will live my life until my life runs out. I am wonderful, I deserve to be wonderful, and I contain multitudes. He closed the door and snapped the lock shut. And that is how Act 1 and the entire novella ends. In reading through the novella, looking at the film's trailer, and contemplating certain details about the adaptation process, a fair bit of why I am optimistic about this being adapted is specifically because it's Mike Flanagan. The Fall of the House of Usher took a bunch of different Edgar Allan Poe works and combined them into one very compelling season-long narrative. With The Life of Chuck, it's already a novella where all 3 acts are about Chuck, as well as some of the other people in his life or in his mind. Where Mike Flanagan's creativity comes into play is to flesh out more of these details, make sure that the information flows in a way that ensures the audience can understand the most meaningful moments, since they are not able to read the character's mind the way that readers will just read a character's thoughts in a book, novella, or short story. I also really expect that Mike Flanagan will have no major issues further developing and amplifying the emotional impact and the themes, because it's well known at this point among viewers of Mike Flanagan's works that when you watch something he made, you are probably going to cry and possibly also have an existential spiral. Life and death, immense sorrow, these are staples of many of the things he's made. That's a very broad description, I will admit, but it applies to many of his best known and most beloved films and series. Dr. Sleep, The Fall of the House of Usher, Midnight Mass, The Haunting of Bly Manor, and The Haunting of Hill House all end with at least one major character dying, if not several of them. Having all of that in mind, when I read the novella, The Life of Chuck, where you focus on a protagonist who becomes very aware of his mortality at a young age and has to grapple with that as he goes through his life, and somehow managing to keep this hopeful, joyful, life-affirming quality to the narrative, if you had given me this novella to read, and had asked me to pick a director who made the most sense to be the one to direct an adaptation of it, I would have said Mike Flanagan. This seamlessly fits in with the types of stories he is most known and beloved for. Circling back to my grudge over the masses sleeping on the brilliance of Dr. Sleep, I am particularly excited at the prospect of him being back on the big screen, because Dr. Sleep had some of the most spectacular, visually imaginative, and dynamic sequences that I saw that entire year. My expectations are high because I'm hoping that all of the big hits he's had with these Netflix series will have helped him to build up more goodwill and connections to be able to secure the level of budget to create those incredible visual sequences I know he's capable of, because I am one of the people who actually saw Dr. Sleep on the big screen. That dream sequence where Rebecca Ferguson is transporting herself as a dream walker of sorts to visit Abra and get inside her head. If you've seen it, you already know what I'm talking about. I'm expecting at least one moment that will fully blow my mind the way that that one did. Now, admittedly, he won't have the element of surprise working for him because now I am very aware of Mike Flanagan as an artist and what it is that he's capable of. But still, the level of skill and emotional awareness he has as a storyteller is very high. I expect big visuals, emotions, and overall impact. The Life of Chuck, you were on my watch list and you have been for a while now. The one thing I'm curious about is the plot twist, is it going to be treated as a very big plot twist that those particular characters only exist in Chuck's mind, or will that be very apparent from the very beginning? Because if so, it's going to be very amusing to be surrounded by people on opening weekend who don't know that that's coming, whereas I know that that's coming because I read it beforehand. It's a bit like when I saw Last Christmas for the first time, and every film buff had already clued into the reveal of what that story was actually going to be. And to be surrounded by women who thought it was just going to be a very normal, not emotionally devastating rom-com and have the reveal be revealed, oh, it was priceless. So yes, I am at least very prepared for that reveal if it's going to be treated as a very big dramatic reveal. They have not given it away in the trailer, so here's hoping for some very good reactions on opening weekend.